new airstrikes in Ukraine as Russia claims to have inflicted extensive damage on Ukrainian forces.
Aid agencies in Hungary work to help hundreds of thousands of refugees arriving from Ukraine.
As France's farming sector pushes for agricultural independence, local producers are starting to worry about the economic consequences of war.
Civilians and officials in Toulouse mark the 10th anniversary of terrorist attacks which killed 7 people.
Bulgaria's former Prime Minister Boyko Borisov has been released after 24 hours in police custody for suspected misuse of public funds.
The Russian Defense Ministry has released videos of what it says are airstrikes on Ukrainian military targets as the battle to influence perceptions of the conflict intensifies. The video of unspecified locations follows the announcement that it had used a hypersonic missile in combat for the first time, saying it had destroyed an underground weapons warehouse. In total, said Defense Ministry spokesperson Igor Konashenkov, since the beginning of the special military operation, 196 Ukrainian drones, 1,438 tanks and combat vehicles, as well as 1,237 special military vehicles have been destroyed. Ukrainian forces were also hit in Mykolaiv, where dozens of soldiers are believed to have been killed in an airstrike at their brigade headquarters. The search for survivors continues. The Ukrainian government, for its part, claims to have killed 14,000 Russian soldiers since fighting began. There are tactical battles of local importance, said a Ukrainian spokesperson. The main focus of the enemy remains the same. The direction is Izium, Volnovakha, Mariupol, Mykolaiv. According to preliminary data, the commander of the 8th All-Military Army of the Southern Military District of the Russian Federation was killed. The Ukrainian government has conceded it's losing control of the now heavily damaged Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol. It said 10 humanitarian corridors have been agreed with Russian forces, including one from the devastated port city.
More than 290,000 refugees have already arrived in Hungary from Ukraine. The aid organisation Migration Aid is working to help them find accommodation with a converted workers' hostel. There are 64 rooms and 280 beds here. The operation is sustained through a combination of donations and volunteers. After a while, in every crisis, people are starting to get tired, he says. That's why I also tell our volunteers, some of whom are sleeping here and they only sleep for an hour or two, I say it's a marathon. So if you want to help, also in a week or two, relax, take a day off. Don't do it constantly because you will burn out. At Budapest's Eastern Railway Station, organisations and churches have created a children's corner. Here, mothers can feed the youngest children and preschoolers can play. According to the UNHCR, almost half of the refugees are children. Adolescents are often seen drawing, and they're trying to manage their trauma this way. Our reporter says most of the volunteers I talked to in the children's corner all say they were very tired, and the vulnerability of little children is mentally burdening them too. They also said that at the same time, when they feel they can help someone, it gives them strength.
South, a sleepy agricultural hub in the northwest of France, is some 2,000 kilometres from the war in Ukraine. The region is currently battling an outbreak of bird flu, but residents are also feeling the pinch. Local farmers are facing a sharp increase in energy and cereal prices as relations between Russia and the European Union go from bad to worse. This pig and chicken farmer says there is a direct impact in our farms. The price that we sell our chicken hasn't really changed, while we have a 50% increase in the cost of our animals because of the increase of grain and raw material prices. So this situation is unbearable. The bloc approved a fresh raft of sanctions earlier this week. But as prices continue to rise, dairy farmer Philippe wonders what will happen in the short and medium term. He says, I hope that the EU and the government will protect the farming sector, because we have the means to produce our food locally and feed our citizens. France has long encouraged Europe to become more independent in its agricultural production. While France produces most of its own wheat, corn and rapeseed, the country is still heavily dependent on Russian fertiliser.
Local people in Toulouse, along with politicians, military personnel and representatives of the Jewish community, have been marking the 10th anniversary of a series of terrorist attacks in which 7 people were killed by Islamist gunman Mohammed Merah. The commemoration comes ahead of events on Sunday, which will bring together 2,000 guests, including French President Emmanuel Macron and Israeli President Isaac Herzog. Former heads of state François Hollande and Nicolas Sarkozy and members of the Muslim faith will also attend. On the 19th of March 2012, 3 Jewish school children and their teacher were among those shot at a Jewish school in Toulouse. The children were aged between just 8 and 3 years old. After a manhunt, Merah was shot dead by police on March the 22nd, following a 30-hour siege at his Toulouse apartment. 4 days before the Toulouse attacks, Merah, who was Algerian-French, had shot 2 off-duty uniformed French soldiers and seriously wounded another in Montauban. Before he was tracked down and killed, he'd filmed all of his attacks on a body-worn camera and made a video which he distributed to TV news channels.
Bulgaria's ex-Prime Minister Boyko Borisov has been released from custody. The Gerb party leader and 3 of his officials were detained for 24 hours. Borisov's lawyer, Menko Menkov, said the arrest was part of an investigation into alleged extortion. However, prosecutors failed to come up with sufficient evidence to press charges. On his release, the 3-time Prime Minister told his supporters, "Next time they can kill me." While Borisov is the highest-ranking politician to be arrested in the country, his detention has rocked Bulgaria's parliament. Some lawmakers were heard chanting for his resignation on Friday, while the opposition Gerb party stormed out of the session and joined protesters in front of Sofia's parliament building, calling for his release. However, current Prime Minister Kirill Petrov says that no Bulgarian is above the law. Borisov was subject to corruption allegations several times during his tenure, but has denied any wrongdoing. Petrov's We Continue the Change party won last year's election on an anti-corruption ticket. It's been 11 years since the revolution in northern Syria began. Despite years of deadly Russian-backed offensives, thousands of protesters in the rebel enclave of Idlib took to the streets this week, calling for an end to the Assad regime. 5 million people have fled the country since the uprising began, while some 500,000 lives have been lost as the brutal crackdown on democracy continues. Brazil's Supreme Court has blocked popular messaging app Telegram in a bid to battle the spread of disinformation ahead of this year's presidential election. The move follows Telegram's failure to comply with previous rulings and remove accounts disseminating fake news. Telegram is widely used by President Bolsonaro and his supporters. Justice Alexandra de Moraes says Telecom's regulator Anatel has 24 hours to implement the suspension. 3 Russian cosmonauts have safely arrived at the International Space Station. The crew blasted off from their launch facility in Kazakhstan and docked their capsule at the lab just 3 hours later. Space veteran Oleg Armatyev and rookies Denis Matveyev and Sergei Korsakov were greeted by a crew of 2 Russians, 4 Americans and 1 German. The trio were the first new arrivals to the space station since Russia's assault on Ukraine began.
5 historic cemeteries have been discovered in the Saqqara region of western Cairo that are the burial places of leading figures from more than 4,500 years ago. Saqqara is part of the Memphis cemetery named after the god Seker from the Old Kingdom. Some tombs are for major statesmen, but one is for the wife of a man named Yat and another for a woman called Betty. There have been many archaeological discoveries in Saqqara over the past year, including hundreds of coloured tombs with well-preserved mummies of senior figures from the 26th dynasty.